Sego, Gano, Chouin, Ani, Bougeot, good evening, bonsoir. I am very deeply honored that you've chosen me to receive the David C. Smith Award for 2014. I will accept the award in the name of the Indigenous peoples of Ontario who are currently in post-secondary studies and training, realizing their vision. And I will also accept the award in the name of the tens of thousands of Indigenous youth of Ontario who are waiting to realize their potential and who will do just that and more if we support them. I think of them every day. Well, with the award comes the opportunity, as Max has said, to share my thoughts with you. And you know I'm not shy about that. Those many people, good friends in the room, I know so many of you. And thank you for being here tonight. Nyawagoa. I hope I can strike a chord in your mind, your heart, and of course your conscience, so you will rededicate your efforts to ensure that these youth and children that I've talked about are not left behind. I begin also by acknowledging the original peoples of this place, this region, the Mississauga and the Seneca. Of course, my husband, he's a Seneca. I have to acknowledge the Seneca. I hope tonight to advance one of the most important dialogues that will make a difference in the Canada of the 21st century. This is, I believe, an appropriate endeavor in memory of David C. Smith, who is known for his contribution to public policy on higher education. In 1996, David C. Smith was chair of the advisory panel on future directions for post-secondary education in Ontario, which reported to the then Minister of Training, Colleges and Universities. The report applauded and encouraged Aboriginal groups for their search for policies to fit their needs. Felt also that the issues our people raised merited careful attention, but felt that the panel's time was too limited to address them. Well, perhaps tonight we might constitute ourselves as the 2014 panel on future directions for post-secondary education in Ontario. And albeit 18 years later, fulfill David Smith's hope that the major issues of Indigenous peoples and higher education and training will be addressed. To fully appreciate the situation we face, well, let's start with the reality check so we're all on the same page. I have a little difficulty, as a matter of fact, I've struggled, some conflict in doing this, in preparing my remarks tonight. Because on the one hand, I find myself dismayed that tragic, troubling situations which I've seen over my lifetime continue to prevail as we move well into the 21st century. At the same time, I have seen and do see today so much change. So many real success stories that reinforce the point for me that when Indigenous peoples are active participants in creating their own future, our own future, and have the resources to do it, such beautiful, positive results take place. Well, my feeling of encouragement then turns into impatience. So I hope tonight to take you through some of my thoughts and not leave you with a feeling certainly of hopelessness, but one of hope for the future. Because I feel there is much reason for optimism. Because I believe the answers are known. There's no mystery here. The resources required are also within Canada's means. So there is reason for optimism, and I encourage many of you in this room who are working on these challenges to continue and increase your efforts to make room for the Indigenous peoples to assume our rightful place in the future of Canada. Let me first acknowledge the demographic realities, just so there's no question that we've got them uppermost in our minds. Imagine, if you will, to bring you into the place of our communities, an Ontario in which over half the population were living generation after generation on social assistance, supported by equalization payments from the other provinces where money went into relief rather than rebuilding ravaged community economies. Imagine an Ontario where only 8% of students attend university or post-secondary training. Imagine an Ontario where there are critical shortages of trained people in every field and insufficient numbers of students being prepared to fill vacancies that are coming. Imagine an Ontario where only half of the children in grade 6 are going to graduate from high school, and only 2 or 3 of them are really have any hope of higher education. An Ontario where over half of the children in your province live below the poverty line, and a place where thousands of bright, competent students who do graduate from high school against all odds do not attend university simply because they lack the financial resources and other supports to make university a real possibility. Well, I thought also that in 2 years in Canada, we're going to be celebrating the 20th anniversary of the tabling of the report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. That, you'll remember, was established as a result of what Canada calls the Oka crisis of 1990. Remember that? RCAP, it's become known as. 1996. I'm asking that you accept now a brief review of the Royal Commission report as a reminder, a review of the targets we're to aim for, because it's a helpful beacon to guide our efforts. The report, is not out of date. Dust it off. It's still timely. It said, Indigenous parents and communities must have the opportunity to implement our vision of education. Indigenous children are entitled to learn and achieve in an environment that supports their development as whole individuals. It said they need to value their heritage and identity in planning for the future. It said this will not happen if the education system continues unchanged. It said, for significant change to occur, Indigenous peoples must have the authority to organize their own education and to influence how their children are educated in an integrated system of lifelong education. Also, it is vital that Indigenous parents and families be able to become involved, articulating and shaping the education they want for their children. Well, the Royal Commission recommended that instruction in Indigenous languages should have a priority and that immersion programs should be available. So those were the beautiful, powerful conclusions in the Royal Commission report, with hundreds, I think 400 recommendations as part of what they called a comprehensive agenda for change, a 20-year plan calling for a 20-year commitment. It rejected what it called the usual strategy, tackling the problem one at a time, tantamount to putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. Instead, the report wanted revitalization, putting an end to the staggering human and financial cost of supporting communities unable to manage for themselves. Within 20 years, it projected the benefits would be greater than the costs, and from that point on, the benefits would exceed the costs. The result of the agenda was to be an end to dependence on the institution and resources of other governments. Well, the end of this debilitating dependence is something we all profoundly desire. The renewal of the relationship must be done with justice and generosity, and remarked that history and human decency demand restoration of fair measures of land, resources, and power to Aboriginal people. On those foundations, it said, self-respect and self-reliance will grow steadily in Aboriginal communities. And in their absence, anger and despair will grow steadily deeper, with conflict the likely result. They said what we propose is fundamental, sweeping, and perhaps disturbing, but also exciting, liberating, and ripe with possibilities. Well, that groundbreaking report was tabled in 1996, 18 years ago. And almost immediately there were complaints from the public and government. Oh my goodness, this plan, it is going to cost a fortune. It is too costly. It is not realistic. And in response, the Royal Bank of Canada courageously commissioned their own analysis and agreed with the Royal Commission that yes, there's heavy costs are here. But it also warned that if these costs were not met, the cost of doing nothing would be even greater. That was in fact the title of their report, The Cost of Doing Nothing. Well, the Royal Commission had set it out point blank. Canada can no longer afford the status quo. In addition to direct costs, they said there were also the costs of missed opportunities, lost, foregone gains, a future much less than it might otherwise be. Billions, they said, would be lost each year by the failure of the country to realize the full economic potential of Aboriginal people. The acceptance of low labor force participation levels, atrocious unemployment levels, low earnings from the jobs that are held, and low incomes from other forms of wealth creation. The Royal Commission made the case that in 1996, the cost of the status quo was then $7.5 billion. It estimated that the status quo cost would escalate to $11 billion by the year 2016, and here we are. In other words, leaving aside moral, legal, social, and other arguments for change, there were and are financial arguments for doing things differently. Think of it as an investment. There's a marvelous study done in 2009 by the Center for the Study of Living Standards. They demonstrated that if we could close the gap in education and employment between Indigenous people and other Canadians, over the next 15 years, we would save $115 billion. That's on the expense side. On the other side, we would add more than $401 billion to Canada's GDP. A huge boost, hard to ignore the opportunities there. Neither we nor government can ever forget Indigenous people were the fastest growing demographic group in Canada. Statistics Canada says our current 3% of Canada's population will almost double by 2031. That can be a warning if nothing else changes, I guess. But if we have change, it's a harbinger of opportunity, untold opportunity for positive action. Look at the demographics. 40% of the Indigenous people's population in Canada are under 20. How does that compare with the rest of Canada? Well, it's 24% non-Aboriginal. The median age of our population of non-Aboriginal Canadians is 40. What's ours? 25. By 2026, in this 21st century, more than 600,000 Indigenous youth will have been ready to enter the labor market. But we already know that far, far too many will not do so. They will not be prepared for the jobs that are seeking workers. This would be a personal and national economic tragedy. And there is another incongruity that's part of this equation. When I open the paper and hear the discussion in the country going on about foreign workers and having to bring in foreign workers to meet labor shortages, I am certain they will make a significant contribution to Canada's economy. Don't get me wrong. But it's pretty hard to explain to our young people who've been ready to go to work but can't get the necessary training and education for those jobs awaiting workers that, you know what, this opportunity is not for them. Sometimes when I talk about Inspire, our people ask me, well, what's the use of working hard to get through high school when I won't be able to go on to training or higher education? Frankly, I don't have a good answer. What I can say is that I firmly believe, and I have seen enough to say that Canada is ready now to do what the Royal Commission argued for 2 decades ago. To make a dramatic, sharp break from the patterns of the past and have the courage and the foresight to establish a new relationship between Indigenous peoples and the rest of Canada. And here I'm going to talk about the story of the Gordian knot. You know, at one time in ancient Greece, there was a place without a king. A prophet decreed that the next man to enter the city driving an ox cart should become their king. Well, that person was a humble farmer named Gordias, and he was declared king. In gratitude, his son Midas tied the ox cart with a most intricate knot to a tree to serve as a monument of the occasion. Over time, the ox cart was in an inconvenient position for passing traffic, but no one was able to untie the knot, so it could be moved for centuries. Well, along came Alexander the Great, and after failing to untie the knot like everybody else who tried, Alexander just drew his sword and sliced the knot in half. The ox cart was moved aside. The problem had been solved. Rather than standing for the problem, which cannot be solved, the Gordian knot, for me, stands for taking dramatic, fresh approaches to resolve problems which seem to be intractable. So let's get inspired by that story. Where is that sword? And that's what I ask of you tonight. As a country, as leaders, let's walk away from dealing with the old problems by applying the same concepts that have caused them. let's walk away from the proposed solutions which over and over have proven they don't work, and simply accept responsibility to change the unacceptable situation which confronts us today, right here, right now. I see many of you in this room, and I acknowledge and celebrate you. You are doing just that. And there are too many of you to point. But I know the leadership that's here. And I also see the great potential that is here tonight. I see people who've made significant changes in their institutions with respect to Indigenous education. I encourage you, carry on. Increase your efforts. I encourage you also to mobilize the entire university sector, both provincially and nationally, to accept the challenge of making significant change. And buoyed by your successes there, I encourage you to use your considerable prestige and authority to convince Canadians to make change, locally, regionally, nationally. Why? It's in all of our interests, very simply. I see my friend Dr. Paul Davidson here tonight, the president of the Association of Universities and Colleges of Canada. He wrote a marvelous op-ed piece in the Toronto Star headlined, "Canada's potential is inseparable from Aboriginal potential." That is a reality that many Canadians have not grasped, but it can become a powerful motivating factor. Let me call to your attention a report that was done jointly by Indspire and AUCC after a national working summit on Aboriginal post-secondary education. We called the report Moving Forward, and it has lots of ideas and very practical ideas on what can be done to change the situation, what can be done to attract and retain Indigenous students. It makes the point, where there is success, reward it. And where there is a best practice, encourage it to be replicated wherever we can. Well, you've heard that I'm now the president and CEO of Indspire. I am so privileged. This is a charitable foundation, and let me say we welcome and work with many of you as partners in the realization of the rich potential of Canada's First Nations, Inuit, and Métis youth. We at Indspire assist Indigenous students to realize what we know is their immense potential. If they get out of high school, against all odds, we better be there to support them. And we are, so that they can achieve their potential for their own well-being and that of their families, their communities, their nations, Canada, and the world. We work hard to get students through high school, to get them into colleges and universities and training, and helping them to stay there and succeed. We also, you heard about an institute we launched a year ago. Nothing less than the goal is to transform Indigenous education in Canada into a culturally appropriate, community-driven engine using innovative best practices in the classroom. That's the only way, I believe, we'll ever convert our huge potential to be a part of the Canada of the future into the dramatic results of which we're capable. Through our bursaries, the Indspire Awards, and our Institute, we are increasing the core of potential change agents in our communities. Over the years, I am proud to say we've awarded more than $65 million through 20,000 bursaries, second only to the Government of Canada. Last year, in many of your institutions, this included 161 students studying medicine, 342 in nursing, 167 pursuing business and commerce degrees, 164 lawyers. We have to have some lawyers, you know. And 261 studying in the field of education. Those are statistics you don't see in the news when you hear about Indigenous people. But that is the reality. That is the potential. In Ontario alone last fiscal year, we provided $3 million in bursaries to 926 students. And we know also that the students we're supporting, they want to give back. Our children and youth know they are potential change agents. So this adds up for Indspire to a new kind of philanthropy, maybe an old kind of Indigenous reciprocity brought back to life, one that gives back, one which not only meets today's needs, but also is going upstream to reduce the need. Because we are interested in restoring the capacity for self-sufficiency so that communities themselves have the resources so their children and youth really can realize their potential. And we know from a recent survey, which I'm told have to say, Roberta, preliminary. Okay, I said it. Our recent survey results revealed that the students who receive our bursaries succeed. Over 90% of them graduate. 90%. Amazing. We also know that over 82% of them are employed. And the vast majority have jobs serving Indigenous peoples and communities. Amazing potential. If our current generation is supported so that they can become achievers, wow, what will they do for their circumstances, their families and communities? The entire country will be enriched. I have no doubt in my mind. Our problem, of course, is we can only meet 26% of the needs of the applicants coming to us. So there are many students who want to do, want to study, want to go, want to give back, and we can't support them. So I was really happy, Max, when the Government of Canada committed the $10 million, new dollars, on the condition that Indspire, Roberta, and my entire gifted team go out and raise matching dollars from the private sector. And I am thrilled to say, my notes said we're at the 6.3 million mark, but tonight we're at $6.6 million mark and counting. We're going to get there. No doubt about it. Why? Canadians, you, corporations, people want to get behind a good news story for Indigenous peoples in Canada. And I'm very happy to say we're in discussions with the Ontario government to secure their commitment to invest also. Who can refuse matching? $1 becomes $2, Minister Zimmer. How can, you know, what's fun? Who can turn that down, right? That's what all the appeal ads on TV and radio go for, and it works. That's why they do it. The response that we've received thus far throughout Canada to our Building Brighter Futures campaign tells me Canadians do care, that they want to be part of successful initiatives, that they want to tell a positive story about Canada and Indigenous people. They're saying to me they want to turn the page and look to the future. Well, I hope tonight these words have sharpened your view of the vision we can seek together. I hope the message has given you inspiration for redoubling of your efforts. And I come to the close with sharing with you a gift from the past, which I find so useful in focusing my own energies. You know, the Mohawks of the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, not so far from here, are instructed that in living our lives and making our decisions for the future, we have to focus our attention not on ourselves, not on our children, not even on our grandchildren, but rather, we say, on the seventh generation, whose faces we can still see coming towards us. The seventh generation, it's not a figurative abstraction. It's real people, real human beings not yet born, the people who will call us their ancestors. And it's always a very humbling wake-up call for me to think for a moment and stop. Think of myself of being an ancestor to children not yet born. Our future generations have every right to expect that we will take up the responsibility of putting our minds together, all of us, to improve the lives of all of our children. And the opportunity to live a life focused on the seventh generation has been so powerful for me. I commend it to you for your own consideration. It's taught me a lot. Both the opportunity and responsibility to create change in my time. It's also taught me I don't live alone in this world. We walk with our past, we walk with our present, and our common future. It's also taught me to seek a longer view whenever I felt the push of impatience. And those of you who know me well know that's probably my middle name. And sometimes the immobilization of despair. We all have felt it. But when I get up in the morning and look in the mirror and think of the seventh generation, you very quickly start to push to go beyond the mark, to go in new directions, to find new opportunities that don't always appear when you're thinking of the short term. Well, 3 years from now, Canada will be celebrating the 150th anniversary of Confederation. What a marvelous motivation. What a marvelous gift we can leave our future if by then we'll be able to say, in Canada, Canada, all Indigenous children receive an education which helps them to fulfill their potential so that they can make their full contribution to their people, their nation, to Canada, and to the world. How much nicer it will be to sing, "O Canada," that day, with that goal in our hearts and minds. 2017, in our own lifetimes. Well, thank you for listening to my words. Thank you for offering me the challenge implied with the David C. Smith Award. I think you can see that together, I believe, we can do what needs to be done. In our lifetimes, together, we can do what needs to be done. Nyawagoa, thank you for listening to my words tonight.